What is going on, everyone? So as you guys may or may not know, I literally love every single one of you guys. That was kind of spontaneous, I know, but I just, sometimes you just gotta say stuff. And in this video, it's going to be a lot of me saying stuff. And as you guys know, I've just been taking so much time talking about the new iPhones, even the iPhone XR. I don't hate the iPhone XR at all, but I literally love talking about older technology. I'm sick and tired of talking about the new things. I said this in my iPhone 6S video as well, but phones like the iPhone 7, like the iPhone 7 Plus and the 6S and the 6s, those phones really intrigue me way more than any other phones do. And for good reason too, just because they had way more of an impact than a lot of the newer iPhones are having, or even the newer phones in general, if I'm being honest. And in this video, I want to specifically talk more about the iPhone 7, but I feel like I'm going to go range a lot more topics than that. Maybe, probably not, but I just kind of want to get that out of the way. But starting off, this phone came out in 2016 in September, and considering this is the last day of September, so I would consider this maybe like a 2-year updated review. And I would say this body is one of the weaker aspects of this phone, and I'll get into more of it in a second of why I specifically don't necessarily like this body, but it's a familiar design for sure. I mean, we have the home button up front. We actually had a different home button. This is the first time we saw it. Not only did we have Touch ID 2, the same thing from the 6S, but the home button on this is actually a virtual vibration motor, and it's not an actual button. And for me personally, I used to like it when I had a 7 Plus as a daily driver, but I shortly, right after I got rid of my iPhone 7 Plus to get an iPhone 10, I started disliking it, and I'll get into more of it in a second. But in terms of everything else, I like the build quality. It still feels very, very good. Even if you're getting it now, you shouldn't be afraid of this phone feeling cheap or anything like that. I think it still holds its own, and it can definitely, if you get it now, it's not going to feel old at all or anything. This was the first iPhone to get rid of the headphone jack as well, so there's no headphone jack on this. You have to use the Lightning to 30-pin headphone jack connector. I don't even know what it's called. Luckily, if you get this brand new, you still get the Lightning adapter in the box, unlike the newer iPhones, which is so stupid. I don't know why they did that. But that's pretty much it looking around the body. If you guys haven't seen an iPhone 7 yet, you should probably go reevaluate your life, because there are 300,000 of these things out right now. Now looking at the front, it has a 4.7-inch panel. It's 750 by 1334, so not the greatest panel in the world, but it's still going to give you some decent colors and saturation, I guess. It's an IPS panel, it's not AMOLED, so take that as you will, but it's not horrible, don't get me wrong. It'll definitely get the job done. And kind of going further, actually, we have IP67 dust and water resistance on this panel or on this phone, so you're able to go, if you get a little bit of water on it, you'll be perfectly fine. Even if you dump it into a bathtub or something, you'll be good. It can go up to 1 meter for 30 minutes. So as long as you did not replace the screen by third-party people or anything like that, you should be good to go. But just know that if the screen is replaced or anything is open in the phone, you do kind of get rid of that water-resistant residue, so it will probably not be able to use that, and it will probably get wet, but just kind of keep that in mind. But most likely, you're not going to have this issue. But I do want to say that, because if you're getting this phone used, especially now, that is kind of an important factor to keep in mind. Now, cool thing is this phone still kept Force Touch, unlike the iPhone XR, so you do have that feature going forward as well. Now, kind of going further along and kind of looking back, when this phone was released, it started off getting iOS 10, which is a good thing. iOS 10 was a very good software, but then shortly after got iOS 11, and we all know how iOS 11 went. It wasn't the greatest thing ever, but now we're on iOS 12, and iOS 12 is a very good software as well. It handles everything just fine. So going through that time wave and everything, this phone should be getting another 2 years of support. So what I mean by that, well, technically 3. So it's getting all of iOS 12, it's going to get all of iOS 13, it's going to get iOS 14, and I believe it's going to stop at iOS 14. So technically speaking, we have another 3 full years, but only 2 more full software versions after iOS 12, which is still a lot, don't get me wrong. If you get this phone now, you're not going to have to worry about not getting the latest features or anything, but in some cases, you might not get the latest and greatest features, because the iPhone 10 and then 10s and 10s Max, those are the designs, those gestures, those everythings are the new wave, so we're not going to necessarily be able to get a lot of those features on the iPhone 7, especially I think on iOS 13. I think that's when they're going to start switching things up. But in terms of performance, this phone has the Apple A10 Fusion chip. It has a quad-core CPU clocked at 2.34 GHz and 2 GB of RAM. Now, with those specs, you would probably assume that it doesn't handle performance that well, or there's some problems with it or something. But in my opinion, and me using this phone, I've really had no problem in terms of performance. A lot of my issues were with software, but I think with iOS 12, it fixed a lot of it. In terms of everything, multitasking, gaming between apps and apps between gaming or whatever have you, it'll be able to handle it just fine. A good thing about iOS is that a lot of the newer phones are still not even that overpowered. I mean, you have the iPhone XS that has 4 GB of RAM, which is still very good, don't get me wrong. It's the best in the market right now, but iOS does not need the most RAM or the highest specs to maintain itself, unlike how Android needs the latest and greatest in terms of technology and specs inside of a phone in order to make it run perfectly fine. In a case like with the iPhone 7, I found it to be very, very good in performance. And a good thing is with a lot of games, especially heavier intensive games, they run benchmarks in the beginning when you load up the game to see which phone you're running it on, whether it needs to lower or up in the graphics and the performance chip and everything. And since there's so limited amount of iPhones, they can actually tune each game to work on those specific iPhones. And I found that working with even my iPhone 5S, I've had it perfectly fine running on it too. Higher intensive games, and here we are with an iPhone 7. And as you can see, it runs perfectly fine. Any game you'll throw at it, it'll work. It might get a little hot, but I still don't think it's that big of a deal at all. So I would really recommend it. If you want a phone with the performance of anything like that, I would definitely recommend it. There's really no problems with it in terms of that aspect. So yeah, that is that area. Now kind of switching to the camera, it only has one single camera in the back, which isn't too big of a deal for me, but it might be for you, so keep that in mind. It is a 12 megapixel sensor, so you are able to have, this camera does have OIS, and I will say it's a very good camera for what it is. It's not the best anymore, but for me, I think my usage and my overlying like ideology for a camera is like, as long as it shoots 4K, I think I'll be fine with it. I mean, and I think the iPhone 6s camera is still very good. I had the 6s Plus and the 7 Plus as daily drivers, and I still thought those cameras are very good, and they still are. When looking at an iPhone 7, you're able to shoot 4K at 30 frames per second. You can shoot 1080p at up to 120 frames per second, and 720p at 240 frames per second. I don't know who would want to do that, but you have that option. And I think it's still a very good camera. You know, colors pop out or anything. I don't really know how to describe it. I'm not a photographer or anything, but it is one of those topics where a lot of people either want my opinion on it or they just want me to reassure them that it's good. And trust me, the camera is going to be fine. If you're really, really picky, then you should probably go up to an iPhone 7 Plus that has portrait mode and all those settings. But even in this standpoint and like I was kind of saving money kind of aspect, I still think the iPhone 7 is going to be perfectly fine. I don't think you're going to have any problems with the camera. The front camera is 7 megapixels and it's still very good. It shoots 1080p at 30 frames per second, and I think it's a pretty decent camera. Again, like I say in every video, I'm too ugly to use the front camera, so I don't know what I'm going to do in that sense. So it might not be too much help for you, but I still think that whatever you use this phone for, the camera is going to be perfectly fine. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for a DSLR or anything, but you have that option there, so. Now, continuing on this train, the next thing I want to talk about is battery life. And this is actually kind of interesting because this phone, technically speaking, out of all the 6, 6S, 7, and 8, this one had the largest battery. It had a 1,960 milliamp hour battery, which is fairly large, you know, and this was actually where at a time where I was super proud of Apple for going and taking the initiative to step up the battery life. They reduced it from the iPhone 6 to the 6S, and they increased it from the 6S to the 7, which was awesome, but then they went ahead and decreased it again to the 8, which was super annoying. I don't know why they did that. But in this case, I will say the battery life was definitely the best out of those 4 phones. It was a lot better on this. Standby time was pretty good as well. I don't think it was the best. The 7 Plus really knocks it out of the park. I think that had the best battery life out of all those 4 versions of Plus variants. And I think the 7 Plus had better battery life than the iPhone 10 as well. But in terms of battery life, it's not going to be the best. You might see yourself charging it by the end of the day. And considering that it's already 2 years out, the battery might have deteriorated. But what I would recommend is if you're getting this phone, go into the settings and make sure it's on like over 80% or 90%. I would say if it's under like 90%, I would just go to Apple and get that battery replaced for around $30. I think they're still doing it. Yeah, they're doing it up until the end of this year. So I really recommend you guys to do that so you can get a fresh battery inside of it, and they'll only charge you like $30 to fix it. So I'd really recommend that. That's actually really, really cool. Now, some other notable things to note. Like I said in the beginning, this phone does have a little bit of problem with the home button. And the reason I say that is because my specific model did have a problem with the home button as well. And the thing is that when you have an issue, let's say you crack your screen or something and you don't want to go to take it to Apple, you want to take it to like some random cell phone repair shop, or you even want to fix it yourself. This phone isn't the greatest with that, because even if you keep the same home button with the same motherboard and all that stuff, if you replace the screen, the home button will stop working and Touch ID will stop working as well. So that means that not only will Touch ID not work, like you won't be able to use the fingerprint sensor, but you won't actually be able to click the home button in. So you won't be able to you'll have to use assistive touch basically. And a lot of people are going to say, well, that's not the case. You're still able to use the home button, but that is not the case. This is completely different from the iPhone 6 and 6S. I replaced the screens on both those and the 5S as well. And I have had no problems with the home button, Touch ID, and everything still works. But with the 7, they wanted people to stop being able to do that. So in order to fix this phone screen, you have to actually go take it to Apple. And if you want to maintain the home button, you have to keep it like that. Unfortunately, that is kind of annoying, especially for people who want to save the most amount of money. But Apple, there's really no way to bypass it. unless you're able to get an Apple employee to do it for you or something. But I mean, it's really not that big of a deal. How many times are you going to crack your phone, you know? But it's still kind of annoying, especially if you want to buy an iPhone that has a cracked screen to save money. You still have to take it to Apple to fix it. There's no way to do it yourself without giving up the home button. Another thing to note, and this is kind of more petty, but it's just something kind of that I have to say. I ran an analysis not too long ago. I made a whole video about it and everything, about the iPhone with the most amount of problems. And basically I went on Reddit and just kind of did an analysis and docked basically which post was saying they had problems with a phone and which phone it was. So if it was like an iPhone 10, I just docked it there. If somebody was saying, oh, my iPhone 6S battery stopped shutting down, or I don't even know, I would just dock it there on Excel. And I made an analysis and everything, and I pretty much found out that the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 7 Plus were the segment of phones that had the most problems, and it was more so the iPhone 7 that was having these many problems, and they ranged from anything from hardware failure to software problems as well. With more software problems, I was kind of more lenient to give it away and just kind of be like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. But I found out that the iPhone 7 has a lot of hardware problems from the post from there. Now, I wouldn't take that as 100% truth, because there could be a lot of faultiness too. Maybe the person was posting too many times. Maybe the same person posted the same post like 10 times or something, or whatever the case is. I still think there's a little bit of truth in that. So does the iPhone 7 have the most problems? No, not at all. But I did find from my analysis that from the iPhone 6 to the iPhone 10, the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus had the most problems from what I saw. Take that as you may. I have an iPhone 7. Besides the home button, I don't have any problems with it, so I don't think it's going to be fair for everybody. Maybe more people bought the iPhone 7, had too many problems with it, I don't know, but take that as you may. But guys, I don't want that letting you down. Like, if you plan on getting this phone, I personally don't think it's a horrible phone, but that's just kind of I'll get into more of that in a second. But like I said, the home button is virtual. You have Touch ID too. You have Force Touch, all those things. You have IP67 dust and water resistance. And pretty much kind of summing it up, is the iPhone 7 worth it in 2018? I will go out and say, I think the iPhone 7 is still worth it, 100%. I don't think it's a horrible phone. I just think there are some lemons out there that kind of cause some problems for some people, and those people were vocal about it and posted on Twitter. But I think all phones have problems like that, and I don't want that stopping you from getting a phone like this. One thing I might say and might add is, even though this phone is worth it, you should definitely go to the used market, because they're definitely a lot cheaper there. I would more so recommend you getting a certified refurbished this time if you do plan on getting it, just because you kind of have more of a warranty with it, and most of the time there are warranties with certified refurbished. And I usually, all the times I link a phone in the description, they're always certified refurbished from Amazon. So if you plan on buying it, I would recommend you getting it through the link below, not only because it helps the channel out and helps us grow and make more reviews like this, but because it is certified refurbished and there's a warranty with it as well. If you want, I'll also link a 7 Plus down there too if you plan on getting that. But that is pretty much it. I do think the iPhone 7 is still worth it. I don't think it's a horrible phone, but that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, all that stuff is down there. I would really appreciate if you guys could check it out. Also, check out my second channel, Lo-Fi Alpaca, dude. I do more iOS reviews on that. I already do all of them on my main channel, but I do more so the Plus variants and a lot more comparisons and battery reviews. So definitely check that out. That's linked in the description as well. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.